I have this story from Barry Weiss's The Free Press that I found interesting. It's kind of an analysis op-ed, but they highlight something important. Women are having a mental health crisis in the modern era across the board. Now, don't get me wrong, it's mostly liberal women for some reason seeing a dramatic decline in their mental health. It says, Pew, has a doctor or healthcare provider ever told you that you have a mental health condition? For women who are 18 to 29, it's over 50%. For moderates, well, for 18 to 29-year-old moderate women, it's actually fairly low. And you can see that even among conservatives, moderates, and liberals, more young women and men have mental health conditions. Here's the thing. Among men, it is extremely high among liberals, which means ultimately, liberals, y'all got a problem. Liberal men in the 18 to 49 have 18 to 29 have higher instances of mental illness than moderate women. And conservative women have lower instances of mental health issues than conservative men. Now, in the 30 to 49, the millennial bracket, it's like millennial to zennial, women are slightly conservative and moderate women have slightly more mental health conditions. But take a look at liberal 18 to 29-year-old women. Over 50% have mental health conditions. Now, why is that? Honestly, I don't know completely. And to be fair, this Free Press article is extremely novelistic and verbose, making it very difficult to understand the point they're trying to make. And they always do these kind of articles. Guys, when you write an article, can you actually tell us your premise before writing your story about how you met Grug Lukianoff and then talked about free speech? Because I don't know if I care. I want to know the gist of why we are seeing an explosive mental health crisis. Now, I believe I do know, and I'll explain it to you. And then I will read some key paragraphs from their analysis. Here's what I believe. Facebook, Twitter, whatever, Instagram. End of the 2000s. I am a young man. Facebook is gaining prominence, becoming more and more active, and people begin consuming information through social media. Eventually, it got to the point where people had more than 300 friends, and their feed of posts was going too fast, so they couldn't keep track. Facebook said, we want to make more people stay on our website. Same with other social media platforms. And they said, let's have an algorithm that shows people what they like the most. So what ends up happening? If you make a post on Facebook that says something like married, baby, family, it always appears at the top of people's feeds because the algorithm says these things get the most interactions. Something else happened. Police brutality videos started to skyrocket. We saw the rise of a lot of libertarian values because people were upset and wanted justice. You'd see videos of cops beating people, and then you'd see people saying, like, cops are bad, the state is bad, etc. Something else happened. These companies started to realize, hey, if I write a news article about, say, the economy, I'll get 100 views. But if I make a video about a cop beating a guy up, I'll get 1 million. Because it's a shocking thing. Then something else changed. These companies said, hey, wait a minute. I wrote about police brutality, and then this one got way more views than this one. Why? Hey, in this article, the guy who got beat up was black, and we talked about racism. All of a sudden, these companies started to exploit the algorithm. Keywords like racism, justice, police brutality, feminism, etc. started to skyrocket in polarizing effect. If you're on the left, you were seeing one world, on the right, another, almost overnight. The conservatives are like, leave the cops alone, man. It's one video out of context. The left was saying cops are racist. So these companies then began mixing keywords because if police brutality gets X views and racism gets Y views, racist police brutality actually gets XY views, which is exponentially, it's multiplied. The result was bigger. Young people started getting inundated with these videos, slammed, and they went insane. Their whole world was built upon false premises. I grew up in a world where I'd go outside, I'd go play. These kids are growing up in a world where they log onto Instagram and they see nothing but racist, 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 racist. Their whole mind is built on it. A kid who was 8 years old in 2008 and not on Facebook, born in 2000, finally gets on the platform in, let's say, 2013. and all they see is racism, white supremacy, and they're 13 years old, and they're like, what is this world? They're now 23 years old, and they vote. And their whole brain was constructed around algorithmic clickbait, rotten to the core. There's no curing that. Their country's hypoxic. Another key component. So that's where I think wokeness comes from for the most part. But another major key component is that young women started seeing all of these increasingly unhinged videos and photos. Women would use filters to make themselves more beautiful. And in order to get more, the same thing is needed. Algorithmic clickbait chasing. The one reason I think that young women have such high instances of depression and mental disorders is because they can't keep up. They'll post a picture of themselves, get 500 likes and go, only 500? What did I do wrong? And they'll delete it. Then they'll take a new one and post it and try and get more likes. And if they get less likes, they're like, oh, it hurts. It's painful. It's creating a psychotic disorder in humans. The reason I think that it's so high among liberals is because a combination of the two. You are constantly high-strung, worried that you'll say the wrong thing, you'll get canceled, and you won't fit in. Here's what they write here at the Free Press. In September 2020, Zach Goldberg, who was then a graduate student at Georgia State University, discovered something interesting in a data set made public by Pew Research. Pew surveyed about 12,000 people in March 2020, during the first month of the COVID shutdowns. The survey included this item. Has a doctor or other healthcare provider ever told you that you have a mental health condition? He graphed a percentage. I wrote to Goldberg and asked him to redo it for men and women separately for young versus old. He did. He found the relationship to politics was much stronger for young white women. You can see Goldberg's graph here, but I find it hard to interpret a three-way interactive blah, 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 blah. So here's some data. In recent weeks, since the publication of the CDC's report on the high and rising rates of depression and anxiety among teens, there's been a lot of attention to a different study that shows the gender by politics interaction. The politics of depression, diverging trends in internalizing symptoms among U.S. adolescents by political beliefs. They say that Gibron et al. Examined the trends in the Monitoring the Future data set, which is the only major U.S. survey of adolescents that asks high school students to self-identify as liberal or conservative, using a 5-point scale. The survey asks 4 items about mood and depression. They found that prior to 2012, there were no sex differences and only a small difference between liberal and conservative. But beginning in 2012, the liberal girls began to rise, and they rose the most. The other 3 groups followed suit, although none rose as much in absolute terms as did the liberal girls, who rose 0.73 points since 2010 on a 5-point scale, where the standard deviation is 0.89. Take a look at this. Hey, that's right around the time I was saying this was starting to happen. It's when these social media companies started catering to the likes of BuzzFeed and Mike.com, who then started spamming social media with insane, psychotic, woke cultness. Around the same exact time, you can see in LexisNexis, also data from Goldberg, huge spikes in the words like white supremacy and white privilege and diversity, etc., etc. This is driving women insane. You know what's funny is I get a lot of people mad at me and they're like, it's not making women insane. Well, fair point. Female conservatives, don't seem to have these problems, but the trend is the same among all groups. Now, to be fair, female conservatives and male conservatives are a lot lower than female liberals and male liberals, but still going up. And I think it's for similar reasons. But I think conservatives are a bit more resilient. The reason I think the diagnoses may be legitimate for many people, regardless of your political faction. That is, a female conservative and a male conservative are getting anxiety from what's happening in this country legitimately, like, hey, these woke people are going nuts, man. And the doctor says you're suffering from anxiety. The female and the male libs believe crackpot distorted reality where they're like, there's white supremacists in my house. And when you think there's white supremacists marching around smashing windows everywhere, you're probably going to go insane. Those insane people, I believe, drive a response in the other side, resulting in depression, resulting in blackpilling, resulting in anxiety, and ultimately these diagnoses. The authors of the study try to explain the fact that liberals rise first and most in terms of the terrible things that conservatives were doing during Obama's second terms. Oh, I love it. Liberal adolescents may have therefore experienced alienation within a growing conservative political climate, such that their mental health suffered in comparison to that of their conservative peers whose hegemonic views were flourishing. It's psychotic, mind you, because it went up for everybody. Anyway, Barack Obama was reelected, et cetera, et cetera. After examining the evidence, including the fact that the same trends happened at the same time in Britain, Canada, and Australia, Goldberg concluded that technology, not politics, was what changed in all these countries around 2012. That was the year Facebook bought Instagram, and the word selfie entered the popular lexicon. Journalist Matt Iglesias took up the puzzle of why liberal girls became more depressed than others in a long, self-reflective Substack. He described what he learned about depression from his own struggles. Like Michelle Goldberg, he briefly considered the hypothesis that liberals are depressed because they're the only ones who see that we're living in a late-stage capitalist hellscape during an ongoing deadly pandemic with record wealth inequality. Blah, blah, blah. Iglesias agreed with Goldberg and other writers that the Lorenz explanation, reality makes Gen Z depressed, doesn't fit the data. And because of his knowledge of depression, he focused on the reverse path. Depression makes reality look terrible. Mentally processing ambiguous events with a negative spin is just what depression is. To put it simply, liberals are depressed because social media drove them insane, and thus everything becomes bad. But I don't think it's that simple. I think it's a combination of the two. Everyone has to maximize pain and negativity online to generate content in the news. Ian asked this on Timcast IRL, saying, why is it that the news is always so negative? And I said, because that's what news is. News isn't like good news is a personal thing. Good news, everybody. The economy is doing great. You're like, well, I noticed it because I don't have to worry when the eggs are cheap. You walk into a grocery store and you see eggs are $3. You go, hey, $3, that's great. I'm not really worried as to why. But one day you walk and you see the eggs cost $6. You go, whoa, what's going on? Why can't I buy eggs? And then you go look it up. The news can only exist if it's telling you why bad things have happened. People aren't going, hey, there's a bunch of really good stuff happening. Can I go look up why? Some people do. Most people don't. I'll put it this way. News. They say it comes from north, east, west, and south. I don't know if that's true. New information or something. What's the new information? Let's say you live in a small village and someone comes running up frantic. I have word. I have word. What's the word? What's the word? The crops are great. Everything's good. And you're like, oh, well, I mean, okay. You know, like, yeah, we have food at the store. I noticed that. Is that going to make me do anything in the immediate? No. The reality was people come running with word saying, I have big news. A barbarian horde is heading this way. You must change what you are doing or a bad thing will happen. Now, some people ignore it. But that's what I think the issue is. News has to be bad. I'm not saying it should be. I'm saying if I tell you a good thing is happening, then you go, okay, so nothing changes. You're right. Good things are happening. If I say, hey, a bad thing's about to happen, you need to change what you're doing, people get angry. People feel bad. They get worried. They get scared. They get depressed. And when bad things don't stop, they get real depressed. That's the challenge of news. Now, I do think, to be fair, because of that function of news, people exploit it and everything is always bad, period. People will turn mountains into molehills to make a villain. Look at Donald Trump. I don't care what your political faction is. I will just say this. People will decide for some reason a person is a villain and then they won't shut up about it. Donald Trump. The guy did not do bad things. Like, he's just a loudmouth. But boy, did these people go insane. And I've seen it everywhere. Donald Trump's not the only person. People will be like, literally Hitler. And it's like, no, what are you talking about? Ron DeSantis, he's next. So I tell you, man, people are obsessed. And there's a lot of issues with people trying to find a reason to be upset, people trying to exploit the machine with negative news, finding a villain, inflaming stories about that villain because it makes them money. That's a reality, man. The Trump stuff's super depressing. But you know what I'm going to do? I'll wrap it up here because you get the point. I'll wrap it up here. And then I got another story coming up for you in a few minutes, which breaks down the end result and where we're going. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes, and I'll see you all then.